Welcome. This will be an EasyScan tutorial just to show you how to get set up and running. And so here I have the scene with just some real simple ships of different colors. We're going to have these guys become different factions. So the first thing you're going to need in your scene is an object to hold the master unit list. It can be any object. We're just going to create one here. And we'll attach the unit list script to it. And so now what it's going to do is it's going to automatically build this faction list based on how you have the enum set up in the script. And this is completely easy to change. It's in the unit list script, and right at the top here we can edit these values, add to them to anything we want. They have no intrinsic value, they're completely arbitrary. All that's going to matter is their relationship to each other, which we're going to define in the inspector. And so here we have that list here. And so we're going to put these blue guys on side 1. So the first thing we're doing is we're going to define the relationships to other factions. And anything we don't put in here will become unknown in the internal logic, which is fine. So we're going to give them enemies, and we're going to make the enemies side 2, which will later designate the red ships as. And we don't need to fill out these others, but we can designate neutral relationships and allied relationships that are of a different faction. And then in side 2, we're going to have the enemies be side 1. And these don't have to match. It'll create some interesting dynamics if they don't. If one side considers another an enemy, but the other side doesn't. These are all possibilities that you can do. Close that up. The next thing we're going to need is that any unit or entity that's going to be targetable, or to make targeting decisions, is going to need the EasyScan script at its root level. I'm actually going to add that to all ships at once here. And so I'll just sort of go over the basic areas of the script before getting too deep into it. We have the reference to the unit list script. You can leave it blank. It'll search the scene for it, or you can just drag and drop that right in there and save a few cycles. Next, we have some options of the classification area here. I'm going to collapse these for the moment. At the top here, we also have these detectable and targetable concepts. This is applying to the unit itself. This is how a unit may be detected by other factions. And here's the option. So by scanner means they actually have to scan the unit. Always means that it'll be always detected regardless of range or line of sight. And then there's never, this unit will never be detected by other factions. It's still going to be detected by its own faction. And then we have targetable. So once a unit has been detected, default is by any, like it can potentially be a target of any unit. Or we can sort of limit that, like you can only target it by your own faction and allies. We can reduce that even more, but only the same faction is allowed to target it. I can only target myself, although you do have to be targeting yourself. And then it can never be targeted. Depending on your game, you probably won't need to mess with this too much, but there are options for you there. Faction, this shows up with the enum again. We're going to make these guys side 1. We have some arbitrary classes here as well. The values that these contain are completely customizable once again. I've just put in some sample ones here for some different common classifications, as well as some common role types. And here I'll go into the script and show you how to change those if you would like. And again, these names, you can add to them, change them up, do as needed. Just don't change the actual variable name values. I've got some example ones for different styles up here too. Next up we have the scanner component itself. And you can choose to activate or deactivate the scatter and targeting modules. I will give them a range. Just type in an arbitrary number here if you'd like, and turn it to active. And now you'll see in the scene view, it's giving you a visual representation of the area that is. It is in 3 dimensions. It's just showing you in 2D because it's a little less cluttered. You can actually toggle the 3D button if you want to get a sphere view if you'd like. And there's a few parameters. Interval is how often the game is going to update units that come into range of this scanning area. I've got it defaulted at 1 here, but you can make it quicker or longer. It just kind of depends on what kind of simulation you're looking for. And then we can limit the angle of the scan if we'd like to just pick up certain areas. We can also have it require a line of sight, and we can define what actually blocks line of sight based on layers in your project if you'd like. It's just a layer mask. Share with allies is an option to share your scan data with allies that are not your faction. Your own faction units automatically get that vision shared. So now for the targeting component, we won't go over everything in here just yet. Again, we have the active button if you want this module active or not. The target that it has selected will appear here. And in this case, we actually have a range minimum and a range maximum. And so the maximum works similar to the scanner, and that this number will put a ring. If you do want a minimum range, we can do that as well. It comes in a little dimmer. So it's only things in this banded area will be targeted. Anything here will not be targeted, and anything out here will not be targeted. Interval, again, is similar to on the scanning module. I've got it set to half a second. Sometimes you want that to be quicker, or even every frame if you put 0. Targeting able works similarly as the scanner. There. The allow self, if checked, will allow you to target yourself. Require line of sight, again, works similarly to the scanning component with a optional layer mask there. And then we have the target relationships that are allowed to be targeted. And you can just add thing and say, okay, we're going to target anything that we don't know what the faction is because we haven't defined it in the unit list. Or anything that is enemy is defined in the unit list, and then neutral ally as well. And so this comprises of what constitutes a valid target. It must pass all these checks. It must be within the ranges and the angle, line of sight, and whatever relationships we've designated. We can add onto here if you'd like and say we're allowed to target enemies in neutral, and you can differentiate between those later. If you don't put anything in here, it's going to assume that any target could be a valid target. We have some filters. We won't go over those just later. These are optional components. And then, of all the valid targets that it has detected, we're going to tell it how to prioritize to eventually pick just one. In this case, we're going to do lowest range from self. And so we can go lowest or highest. We have other parameters to pick from in the range. And then we can actually go from different locations by defining an object or a unit. We'll just leave it for self for now. Finally, we have the audio component here. And we can just leave these blank, or we can put in sounds for specific events. Every time the scanner updates, we can do like a ping sound or something. We can have a sound every time a new enemy is scanned, or neutral, ally, or unknown unit in these blanks. We can have a sound every time a new target is selected, or every time a target is lost. Event targets. This will be, we can actually send scan events to other units. That'll be discussed later as well. Alright, so now I'm going to just set up the rest of the units so they can be recognized. So this other blue ship we're going to designate as side 1 as well. So they're on the same faction. And the red ships we're going to designate faction side 2. And as we previously discussed, they are enemies of the blue ships. Alright, now I'm playing in the scene view instead of the camera view, and now we can still see the range lines, and also we have a new line here. This is pointing to the ship's current target. So we got the blue ship selected here, and our logic says we're going to target the lowest range enemy within our targeting band here. Let's change it to highest. We're still only targeting the one red chip because this one is out of range of our targeting component. So if we increase that, now we can choose between the two, and we're targeting highest, and we can switch back and forth. We're not targeting a blue ship because we're only targeting enemies. If we take away this target relationships, now we can target any faction. We're still targeting the lowest though. So what we can do to test this is if we move the blue ship in a little closer and go back to take a look at the large ship, you'll see that he's now targeting the blue ship. So there's a number of setups and concepts that can be simulated with this system. So let's go ahead and turn off the large blue guy's scanner here. And you'll notice that he loses the target because he's no longer aware of the unit there. Let's go to the blue ship. He's got a targeting range as well, again, but no scanner, so he doesn't know the ship is there. What we can do, though, is we can turn the large ship scanner back on. The smaller blue ship still does not have a scanner, but he's now able to target this unit. And what's happening is he's sharing the scan information with his people on the same team. You can extend this to all allies, but it's defaulted just the same faction. And so what you can simulate is almost like an AWACS style, where one unit has a real long range to sort of direct these smaller units who don't have as long range of radars, or say maybe he just can scan things close to him. Okay, now I'm just going to go over the filters here. And so we can add some filters with different levels of importance. And you can select from a number of different categories, such as adding another range. Yeah, you can target out to 45, but say we want to prioritize, say anything that's under 20. We get another little purple ring here, and you say from self. Again, you can designate some other object if you'd like. And what's going to happen is right now these filters are marked as required, which means they must be passed for this target to be valid. But you can actually designate them as preferred, which means if nothing actually fulfills these filters, then we're going to ignore them altogether and just pick something according to the parameters up here, even though we'd prefer to have whatever's in this area here. Or we can do it the other way around, make it outside the area. Class 1, Class 2, Role 1, Role 2 are going to be the values that a unit has been previously designated as. We haven't defined the red ships as any particular value, but you can select from one of those. Similar with Role. Stats, EasyScan is set up in a way that can integrate with your framework of your project. There'll be another tutorial on that, but you can pick in from some built-in stats like health, shields, armor, energy, threat. You can even add your own, and I have some information on how to do that on the website as well. And then we can compare that to a particular stat value or percentage value, like if you want to target enemies that have 20%, less than 20% health would be that filter there. And we can do, speed gathered from a rigid body. You can do it, make some filters based on relations, factions. And then finally, we have some other options here based on what that unit is targeting, whether they're targeting me or some other relation or faction. Is my target is useful for coordinating weapon fire to focus all on the same target or to select different targets. And then finally, there's a method to send a weapon range to this targeting module that will then fill in what weapon range that you're currently using is. Now you may notice this little checkbox here. We can designate filters as and or filters as or. So if we have a few different filters here, let's say, anything that's checked must pass this filter to consider if passed this filter block. So these are all like required filters. Anything that is unchecked, only one of them, but at least one, has to be passed. So we can say we require the range to be within 20. But other than that, we can say we want class 1 to be medium, and perhaps, or we could say, its role is DPS, for example. So we can pick any one of these. And if we do this as required, then you'll have to have this range and either one of these. If we do preferred, none of these units are going to qualify. So again, we're just defaulting back to the priority here. And then finally, what's going to happen is this target's going to be evaluated every interval, in this case every frame. But if we don't want our unit to be flickering between targets as some get closer or further away, for example, we can also keep a valid target. So as long as the target still satisfies these parameters, you'll keep that target even if it changes in priority. There's one subtlety that has to do with filters, and that if they're required, it will have to satisfy all these filters. But if it's only preferred, if it fails the filters, it'll still be okay as long as it doesn't fail this upper part here. Now, if you want to have more than one target, I have a separate script for that. This is just the targeting module. So we've already got the main scanner script. And now say this other object here, this could be a gun or something that needs its own targeting list. We drag EasyScan targeting in here, and then this is just the targeting portion. It still has audio and events that you can use, but it's a whole separate targeting script that works on the information from the scanner and scans of your other faction. Everything else inside here is going to be the same. And you can add as many of these as you'd like. All right, well, thanks for watching, and be sure to check the website for additional tutorials.